Okay, so today we are diving into a chapter that is just bursting with tension, sailing close to the wind.
Yeah.
You sent over these excerpts about the whaling ship Franklin, and wow,
Yeah.
it's really a powder keg, and right in the center of it all is young Manjiro.
Yeah, it's a pressure cooker of a situation, that's for
Wow.
sure. And I think what is so fascinating about this whole thing is just how quickly things can change, on a 19th century whaling ship.
Right,
One moment, Manjiro, this young castaway, he's considered a bad omen,
right.
like a Jonah. They would have said back then, blame for every bit of bad luck.
Right.
And the next, he's practically a hero.
It's such a complete turnaround.
Yeah.
And what I thought was so interesting was how this whole change in attitude, it really all seemed to happen when Manjiro catches that sea turtle. The
Okay.
wind picks up
Yeah.
after weeks of just being dead in the water. And right after he makes that catch, everyone's suddenly singing a different tune.
Well, it really shows you the power of superstition, especially in that world of 19th century whaling. I mean, these voyages were fraught with danger, and so these sailors clung to any belief, any ritual that might give them even a little bit of control over these wild elements.
So in a way, by blaming Manjiro for the bad luck,
Yeah.
pinning it all on him as this Jonah in their midst, it was sort of a way for them to explain the unexplainable, to create some semblance of order in the chaos.
Exactly. And just as quickly as they made him a scapegoat, they were willing to embrace him as a good luck charm when the wind returned.
Right.
It's fascinating, really, the sort of psychological dance between fear and hope and desperation.
Right.
But it's not just the crew's attitude that's changing.
Right.
The source material seems to suggest that Captain Davis, the one in charge, he starts exhibiting some truly erratic behavior.
That might be putting it mildly from the way that you've described it in your notes. He's practically unraveling, ranting in his nightclothes, brandishing a musket, threatening the entire crew.
Yeah.
Not exactly the picture of a stable leader.
No, not at all. And this descent into paranoia, I think it's really a crucial turning point in this whole story. And it makes you wonder, what is at the root of Davis's behavior? Is it the pressure of a failing voyage? The isolation of command? Or is there something else going on beneath the surface? Whatever the cause, has a chilling effect on the crew, especially Manjiro.
Yeah, they're terrified of him.
And understandably so.
One of the most unsettling incidents that you point out is when Davis orders Manjiro to lower a boat in the dead of night, miles from land.
Right. A completely irrational order doesn't make any sense. And I think it speaks volumes about his state of mind, almost as if he sees Manjiro as completely expendable, a nuisance to be disposed of.
So even though the crew seems to have moved on, he's still clinging to that Jonah label.
He is, but this act of cruelty, I mean, this blatant disregard for Manjiro's safety, it becomes a real turning point because the crew realizes that Davis isn't just a danger to himself, he's a danger to everyone aboard the Franklin.
Right.
And that's when whispers of mutiny start to surface.
And this is where Jolly, the ship's carpenter, he enters the scene, and it sounds like he's been wary of Captain Davis for a while now.
He has, and I think understanding the dynamics of a whaling ship is really crucial here. Because Jolly, as the ship's carpenter, he would have held a position of respect and authority, second, maybe only to the officers.
Okay.
He was someone the crew looked up to and trusted, and it seems that he recognized the danger that Davis posed long before anyone else did.
So when he starts to take action, it's not just some disgruntled sailor, stirring up trouble. This is somebody who commands respect, who understands how serious what they're about to do really is. And mutiny in the 19th century, I mean, that's not something you just did on a whim, right?
No, not at all. Mutiny was a capital offense punishable by death. And this is where understanding the historical context, I think, really underscores just how dire the situation was for these men, because you often romanticize life at sea, but the reality was much harder.
Right.
Maritime law was incredibly strict, and challenging a captain's authority, even one as unhinged as Davis, it carried immense risk.
Yeah. So they're risking their lives to potentially save themselves from a captain who's lost his mind.
Yeah.
Talk about a rock and a hard place, and right in the middle of it all is this young man, Manjiro, trying to navigate this impossible situation. So when we come back, we'll unpack his really heartbreaking internal conflict and explore this daring plan that Jolly puts forth.
Yeah, he is really in an impossible position, isn't he?
He is.
He's watching this potential mutiny unfold and knowing the risks if they do it and the risks if they don't.
Right.
It's like he's stuck between Scylla and Charybdis.
And what's so interesting is that, Manjiro, he isn't just watching all of this happen around him. He's really struggling with his own sense of what's right and wrong. Should he side with the captain, uphold his authority, even though Davis is clearly not well? Or should he take his chances with the crew, knowing that mutiny could be just as dangerous?
Right, a decision with no easy answers. And
Right.
in his journal, we get this incredibly raw and honest look at what he's going through.
You marked this one entry where he talks about feeling like a man caught between two worlds, unable to fully belong to either one.
I mean, those words, his words, they're just so powerful.
Yeah.
And it really makes you remember that Manjiro isn't just some name in a history book.
Right.
He's a real person, a young man who's been thrown into this absolutely unimaginable situation.
Yeah. Could you maybe read us a little bit of that journal entry you found so compelling?
Yeah, let me see. The sea, once my solace, now mirrors the turmoil within me. Duty calls me to the captain, but fear whispers of the storm brewing among the men.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can just feel that weight on his shoulders,
Absolutely.
Loyalty versus survival duty versus self-preservation. I mean, it's a dilemma that's been around forever.
It has. And I think it's that timeless human element that makes this whole story so relatable, even after all these years.
It really is.
But, while Manjiro is wrestling with his conscience, Jolly's actually taking steps to take control.
Okay.
And he goes about it in a surprisingly strategic way.
You mentioned before that he's a well-respected figure on the ship.
Yeah.
But what I thought was interesting is that he doesn't just try to bully the other sailors into following him.
Right.
He really takes the time to build a consensus.
He does the source material, describes him talking to the men one by one, listening to their concerns, and explaining why this mutiny is their only choice.
Huh.
It's a very different approach than Captain Davis's reign of terror.
So instead of ruling through fear, Jolly gets that to lead this mutiny, he actually needs these men to choose to follow him.
Exactly, and it's a powerful lesson in leadership, even for us today.
Right.
The best leaders inspire. They persuade, they bring people along, not by forcing them, but through shared purpose and understanding.
It's interesting to contrast those two approaches,
Yeah.
Davis's authoritarianism versus Jolly's more collaborative style.
Right, and it makes you wonder if things might have been different if Davis had done things differently.
How so?
Well, if he had created a culture of respect and communication on board the Franklin, okay. If he had listened to his crew, dealt with their worries, instead of just letting paranoia and fear dictate everything he did.
It's question without an answer, of course.
It is.
But it does make you think about the importance of good leadership, especially in those really high-pressure environments.
For sure.
But even if they pull this mutiny off,
Yeah.
it doesn't exactly guarantee a happy ending for anyone.
Absolutely not. They're still thousands of miles from home on a ship that's now been marked by mutiny.
Right.
Their lives, even if they survive this, are going to be changed forever.
And Manjiro, right at the center of this storm, he's about to face a choice that will determine his future. It really underscores just how desperate they are to even consider, an act as extreme as mutiny.
Right.
And it brings us back to that question that the chapter leaves us with, when does a leader lose their right to command?
It's a question that still resonates today, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. We see it everywhere, in our workplaces, our communities, even our personal relationships.
Right.
When do we as individuals decide that we're not going to take it anymore?
It's not an easy question to answer.
Yeah.
Every situation is different. Every single context is different.
Right.
But these historical examples, these moments of crisis and rebellion, I think they give us a way to understand the complexities of power and authority and even just this basic human need for autonomy.
It makes you think, what would I do if I were Manjiro?
Right.
Faced with this captain who's clearly lost his way, a crew ready to mutiny, and my whole future hanging in the balance.
Yeah, it's easy to judge looking back from a position of safety.
Sure.
But right then in that moment, having to make those impossible choices, what would you do? What would you prioritize? Loyalty, survival,
Yeah.
justice.
Right.
These are questions that I think go way beyond just this one whaling ship.
They do.
Go beyond the 19th century even.
And that's what I think makes diving into these stories so fascinating.
Yeah.
We're not just looking back at the past.
Right.
We're shedding a light on the present as well.
Exactly. By looking at the choices made by those who came before us, by trying to understand their world and how much their decisions really mattered, I think we come away with a deeper understanding of the challenges we face today.
So as we close the book on this chapter,
Yeah.
on this incredible journey aboard the Franklin, it really does leave us with a lot to think about.
It does.
The dangers of unchecked power, the courage it takes to fight against injustice, and how resilient the human spirit can be when faced with seemingly insurmountable odds.
And maybe it also reminds us that the most incredible stories, the most extraordinary stories, they can pop up in the most unexpected places.
That's true.
They remind us that history, it's not just dates and names.
Right.
It's people.
It is.
Countless individual lives all woven together.
Believes like Manjiro's.
Exactly.
Full of hardship and resilience and this constant search for where he belongs.
For sure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out those hidden connections that unite us all.